Hello, everyone that is just joining. I hope you all are doing okay. Um, I'm going to get a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of minutes for everybody to kind of get in the room. So everybody just chill for a little bit, grab some water or some juice, whatever you grab behind the camera, and we will be starting very shortly. I hope everybody is happy to be here today. I am super excited, and so there's a lot of people coming in. So I'm really excited to have both, Sequoia and Michelle here today. So I can't wait, which means people are really excited. And actually, we've been talking about IRB for a little bit the past couple of weeks. So um, this is going to be fun. Mhm. All right, so it's like 2 more minutes. Okay, 7:05. I feel like most people will be here. Cool. All right, we got a nice little crowd though, so that's good. I like it. Danielle, I know you don't want to be pinned, but you have nothing to do with that. So once we started and introduce everyone, I'll unpin you. But for right now, you're going to be pinned because you're going to introduce yourself as well. Thank you. Some more people are coming in. This is great. Sequoia, where are you calling in from?
I am in New Jersey,
I'm in New York.
Bergen County to be exact.
So you're hot like me because I'm hot right now. Michelle,
Yeah.
where are you calling from, Michelle?
In Kansas City, but
Oh,
I am from Texas, so
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 wait,
hot, hot.
so it's 6 o'clock where you are, right?
It is.
It's 6 o'clock where you are. Okay. All right. All right. Somebody came in right on time. Seven, about to be 7:05. All righty. So, good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to the monthly BWICR Black Women in Clinical Research Career Zoom that we do every month, Career Pathways, which is a way for us to learn about all of the different roles and responsibilities that we have in clinical research and also other roles that are out there that we don't really get to talk about and that are underrepresented in many ways. So today we have two special guests. We have Sequoia Young and we also have Michelle Haynes. We're going to be talking about institutional review boards today, or the IRB, whether you are familiar with them or not, whether you use them or not, or if you're someone like me, regulatory, whether you have a love-hate relationship with them or not. That's what I do. I love y'all both though. You know I do. We're going to be talking about that today. And so before we get started, if you again aren't familiar, I'm pretty sure you all are because you all are BWICR members. I want to let Danielle mention, who's the founder of this great, great organization that filled a space that was void and that was needed. Danielle, if you wanted to say a few opening words, and then I'll turn it over to introduce the two guests that we have today.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I would have probably thrown on some makeup and turned my camera on, but I am okay. So I just want to thank everyone for joining. I love coming to these career, like talking to just about careers and the different careers in the clinical research industry. I know we know that there are a lot. So really make sure that you are taking notes and, connecting with the speakers as well, connecting with Tiffany, just to soak up all of the information that we are going to talk about tonight, because a lot of people are not aware of the different IRB roles that are possible. So, and I know recently we were talking to someone else that worked at the IRB, and they were saying that's how they got their start in the industry. So the IRB does have entry level positions. So listen, take notes, and Tiffany, I'll let you take it away. Are on mute.
I said thanks for introducing yourself and everything that's happening today. And I know you couldn't wait for me to unpin you, so you are fine, and you are in Gen Pop is what I call it. So we have two guests today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to have a discussion where we ask them some questions. And feel free to drop in the chat any questions that you have, and we'll address those as we go throughout the evening. So I'm going to start with you, Sequoia, if you don't mind introducing yourself. Kind of just tell us where you are, how you got into the industry, and if you want a fun fact, we're always open to that too.
Thank you, Tiffany and Danielle as well. So I am Sequoia Young. As I mentioned earlier, I'm from New Jersey originally, but raised in New York a little bit, so best of both worlds. I currently serve as a clinical trials manager of research operations here at the Valley Hospital, which is a community-based hospital in Paramus, New Jersey. I've been in the industry for a little over 15 years now, but I started my career as an IRB administrator. So I've kind of just worked my way up through the industry. I am a certified IRB professional. I'm also a certified IRB manager. And so I would say, just over the course of my professional career and development, I've gained a lot of insight, and I've seen a lot of changes as well when it comes to the IRB. So I'm just happy to be part of the discussion and just share some of my background. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and to share your journey, because a lot of people don't know that you can start anywhere and find a place for yourself in a career in clinical research. So thank you. Michelle, how are you? Tell us a little bit about you and your journey, where you are right now. And again, a fun fact if you want to. Go for it.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Haynes, and I'm just grateful to be a part of this platform and to talk to you about this. So thank you, Danielle and Tiffany, for choosing me to come on to talk to everybody. But I am a community member with the IRB. I started research kind of, I guess, maybe by accident, not sure. I was applying for jobs and I was a phlebotomist. So I started way back as, if you want to say as simple as that, but I loved the patients. And so I got into clinical research that way. Currently, I work as a CRA and I work with Thermo Fisher. So I'm traveling right now. I'm actually in Kansas City. I saw somebody say that they're from Kansas City. So nice place here. But yeah, so if you have any questions or anything about what I do, or we'll get into it. But I work with IRB as well. So thanks for having me, guys.
Real
Perfect.
quick.
Perfect.
I know I don't usually, I'm gonna say, I know I don't usually hop in, but Michelle, if you could tell everyone how you met me, I think that's a funny story.
So I met Danielle at the conference last year, and I was so nervous. And I'm nervous right now. I'm sorry, but I was so nervous, and I was like, I know her. I've seen her so many times, and so I was like, uh, like I was so nervous. But she was on the elevator or coming off the elevator, and I was just so excited to tell her that I was coming to the conference. I was like, I'm the only person here from San Antonio, and she's like, No, you're not. But this group has been door opening for me. So that's a little funny story how I met Danielle. I met her off the elevator, but I was like kind of like starstruck.
I feel like I heard this story but didn't have a face to the story. It's you.
Oh,
It is you, okay?
Yes.
And don't be nervous. You're doing absolutely fine. So I'm the opposite of you because I stalked Danielle on LinkedIn. I was like, I'm going to message this person and we're going to get together, okay? And I infiltrated. Now she can't get rid of me. So thank you again for sharing that story. And also, for those of you who don't know, and I can say this just in the short amount of time that I have known Danielle, she's very approachable. She's always responsive. If you have a question or you reach out to her. She's very personable and approachable. So that was a funny story. So let's kind of just get started. And so I want to start with you, Michelle, because we're talking about a career event tonight, but as a community member of the board, right? So we kind of know what the IRB is in general, but kind of talk to me about the board and your role and what that does, like at a broad term.
Person that sits on their committee as someone that has knowledge behind or some science knowledge base. So when I was presented with the idea of being a community member, I was like, well, I wasn't sure because I had just started in research, but I did have the science background. So the meetings are presented, they have meetings every day, but they're by region. So for me, I'll get a calendar invite. Hey, are you available? And you pick several dates that you're available. And I pretty much pick every time because I want to be I want to be part of the meetings. So we do like continuing reviews for sites that are going to be renewing or they're still doing the study. And then for sites that are being inspected, they do their independent inspections. So people part of the group or part of the board will go out and inspect these sites, and then they present it to us. Do you think this site is ready to start the study? Do you think that they can continue this study? So for me, the meetings come once, maybe 2 or 3 times out of the month, and they're 2 hours at a time, which isn't a lot of time. And I'll explain that a little bit more. It's by region and they do it by site. So they'll call you like, oh, I'm from San Antonio, so I'll do only San Antonio area. And it might be 2 sites, might be just 1 site, but they'll go through their review. They have doctors on there. They have opinion leaders that come and talk. They're a part of the board. You name it. They have the stretch of clinical research. So if you're starting off in clinical research, or if you're maybe haven't branched into clinical research, if you have a science background, this might be something you want to do.
So I just have a quick follow-up question that I see in the chat. What kind of science background do you think IRB boards look for? Is it a broad type of scientific background, and does it vary? Do you have to have a scientific background?
They say that you need to have a scientific background, but you need to be able to understand just regular medical jargon. So to be honest with you, some of the stuff they talk to us about, it's above my head.
Right.
But the people are very good about, if you have questions, they want you as a community member to ask. So I ask a lot of questions just because I'm very curious.
Absolutely.
But they're very they're open, and they just want you to know what you're saying yes to or what you're saying no to.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering that question, and thank you for our audience member who asked that question. So Sequoia, my question for you is, because you're on the operations side of IRB when you were in that role, so can you talk about all of those moving parts behind the scenes before it even gets before the board, and what your role was with that as the IRB manager, making sure that those parts were all in place before the board actually reviewed it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I started in clinical research, my first position was an IRB administrator. So I was pretty much put in a position where I served as the liaison between the investigators and the board. And my responsibility included ensuring that we presented sufficient information to the board in preparation of their review. So that meant, first and foremost, the application that the investigator or his study team was submitting was complete in all aspects, because we want to ensure that they can hopefully come to an agreement whether conditions would need to be met, but at least at the very least have a thorough application. Additionally, we were responsible for ensuring that the investigators and the members of their study team complied with the institutional requirements. Each institution might have certifications through Human Subjects Protections Good Clinical Practice to make sure that they can conduct the research as expected. You know, when it came to just being a source of communication, really, for the investigators as well as the board members, just ensuring that we had all elements needed for a thorough review. And I also attended those meetings and led those meetings too. So some of my responsibilities included taking the meeting minutes. And back when I started, we didn't have EIRB as an option, so it was all paper. Um, Even the protocol submissions, I mean, we had a very large board, probably about 13 members. And so we had to ensure that every application that they were going to be reviewed had all of the pieces to it. And again, protocols, you know, when you think about your protocol, at least over 100 pages. So we had to make sure we had enough copies, extra copies. We also had to ensure that we had a copy of the regulations too, because, you know, when they're reviewing these applications, they are determining levels of risk, as an example, whether the study met minimal risk or greater than minimal risk. So we had to be a resource during those meetings as well.
So I just want to add to that story because I'm from the old school as well. On the regulatory side, you had to submit. And so if you can imagine when I say killing trees, they knew when I went to that printer, leave me alone for the next 2 hours because I have to make 16 copies of everything, take a big box and barrel it down to the IRB. So I definitely remember those days. So
Exactly. Yeah.
everybody's coming in at a really, really good time right now, right? Everything's electronic.
That's right. That's right. And even when we converted to electronic,
Mhm.
ultimately, it was our responsibility to train these board members as well. So, you know, you did a lot. You were responsible for a lot, for sure.
And so, just to kind of continue that conversation, talking about, having to have a copy of the regulations and things around you. So I'm pretty sure everybody in the room is familiar with GCP and ICH and all of those things. When you talk about regulations for a board, are there any other guidances that you specifically were using or that you give to the board, or was it more so GCP, ICH, and FDA regulations?
You know, during the meetings, those were like the foundational resources
Mhm.
that we used. However, some of the discussions, you know, you might bring up the Belmont report, you know, when thinking about informed consent and ensuring that those principles are being enforced during the review.
Mhm.
Um, you know, HIPAA might come up, so there is a resource for HIPAA that you might bring to their attention. The common rule, you know, as the
Yep.
regulations changed, you know, a couple of years ago, that was something that we would have to be mindful of as well. So it was definitely a lot of education, and that was one of the resources that we provided probably quarterly with our members, just to ensure that they were up to date in those type of educational sources.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. So, Michelle, as someone who isn't part of the day-to-day operations, right, that behind the scenes with the IRB, when you came on board, was there any specific training that you had to be a board member, and what was that like for you?
So they do give you a lot of training, and you have to make sure you complete the training before they allow you to sit in any type of meetings. So it's like, I don't know, most of us are on studies, but like you get your list of all the different trainings that you have to do. And it's in this portal. You have your own login, everything. And then it's just like checked off. And once you've done all your training, then they'll start setting you up for being able to participate in any type of meeting. So there is training. They train you on what they expect for you to know.
Absolutely. And I want to just also side note because I see some people at the chat's busy. I love it so much. So when we talk about board membership, because Michelle does have a science background and she does understand that. We all do know that their boards are diverse. And so they will have people I mentioned in the chat. They may have a pastor. They may have a patient advocate who's on there. But again, when you think about it, they're not just going to pull anybody off the street. Okay, they want to know why you're interested in doing this work and that you do have an interest at least in clinical research, right? Because you don't want to just sit on the board and not. And so, you know, for board membership, and we'll talk more about that because I know people want to hear about money. They didn't say it yet, Michelle, but I know how that goes. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Don't worry, we're getting there, okay? So let's continue the conversation. Let's see here. I have a follow-up for that, Michelle. Okay, so now that you're on the board, and they're talking about maybe, you know, a 10 years up for another board member, someone leaves or whatever. Are you part of that conversation when it comes to bringing on another board member? Do you, even for you, did you have to interview? Have you ever interviewed someone? What's the process like to even get there?
So the process to become, so I'm a community member so we're on a board, but we're just members of it. Like you said, pastors and stuff like that. So, scientific knowledge is a better way to say that. You need to be able to understand the scientific ins and outs of what the protocol is saying. So this position came up on Indeed, and honestly, I was just like, let me just see if I can do this. I applied. They immediately pretty much got back to me and said, the question was, why are you interested in doing this? So I was kind of like shocked by the question because I wasn't prepared for it, but I wanted to do it because I've been wanting to do more in clinical research. As I said, I started off as a phlebotomist and I was a research assistant. I was like, how do I move up in this? So sitting on the board, sitting in these meetings gave me knowledge for where I am now, where I'm constantly reading protocols and having to understand things. But the position came up on Indeed. And if anybody's interested, I'm just let me know because I can refer you if the area, if they have community members coming up in the area. So let me know where you're at and I can see if, you know, we can just squeeze you in because a referral is the best way to get in anywhere. Okay, I'm going off somewhere. What was the second part of your question?
Oh, that's okay. No, you actually answered it. And also, if you can drop that LinkedIn of yours, girl, in the chat whenever you get a chance to. At the end, we'll drop it. No, that actually did answer. It was just more so basically because some people may not understand if being a board member or community member is like applying for a job. Because it is a job that you're doing, right? So like, even though, you know, you're not really volunteering, but you are volunteering your time and things like that. But there is a process to be a member. So when we say anyone can be a member, yes, theoretically anyone can be a member, but what they look for is someone who is interested in the work and why you want to do that, just like any other organization that you would join or any other board that you would be on. So let's get to another question. And this is, of course, for you, Sequoia. And again, my background, for those of you who don't know, I have been doing regulatory affairs for pretty much, I did that for about 17 years. And now I just let everybody else stress out. That's not my thing. So Sequoia, what I want to ask you is, you know, no one can start a study until you have IRB approval. And so for those of you not in regulatory, if you're a clinical research coordinator, or even if you're a CRA, you are always wondering, why is it taking so long, right? But with that being said, Sequoia, because I know I'm the regulatory person that always emails and harasses you all, but it's not me, I promise. It's my investigators and the sponsor. But my question is, we do know that you still have to have a strict review process. So how are you able to review a protocol, a consent form, the investigative brochure, patient-facing materials, recruitment, and all of that in a streamlined process and still be able to review in a timely manner and make sure that it's still ethical and compliant? Which I think is a hard thing to do. So I respect it all. I do.
Yeah, it's a lot, honestly. But I think for me, from my experience, you know, just being, you know, starting in research regulatory, just like you, Tiffany, as well as on the compliance side, has really helped me in the long run. So, you know, when I started, I knew nothing about human subjects protections and IRBs. So, you know, I ultimately was mentored by more experienced IRB professionals. And with that, I was able to kind of gain insight on specific components of their review and, you know, when you're looking at a protocol, what elements are you looking for? When you're looking at an informed consent document, what do the regulations explain have to be included in those consent documents? And then, when I crossed over to the other side, working more closely with the investigators, it really was to their advantage because I had the insight of what an IRB is looking for when conducting their reviews. And so I'm able to, again, with my experience, being certified as an IRB professional, being able to conduct a preliminary review of their applications before they even get to the IRB to ensure that, okay, at the very least, you might get an approval with the condition. Maybe they might have some follow-up questions, but we're in good hands. We're in good hands. So I think for me, it just comes with that experience. But also, if you have a mentor, that really helps.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that. And again, for all of you in the room, I don't think anybody, especially if you're even thinking about clinical research, thinks IRB first. You have to leave and learn what that word means, right? That acronym means. But as you start doing the work and you learn when you're interacting with the IRB, or again, even asking your regulatory person, like Tiffany, what's the holdup, right? That's how you start learning about these other areas of clinical research in the process throughout the life cycle of a trial. So thank you for mentioning that, and that you were mentored and kind of led into this role. So what I would like for you to also do for me, if you don't mind, Sequoia, is let's talk about the difference between a central and a local IRB. And I know that can get into some intricacies that we don't need to get all the way into, but again, broad level, can you explain to the audience what a central IRB is versus a local? And for you, and this can be subjective, it's not objective, what do you think is better in terms of your experience? And that can be subjective, but what do you think?
Yes, so I've worked on both sides. Again, when I started, I was working for a local institutional review board, and then in my current position, our IRB of record is a central IRB. So the differences, I would say, in my opinion, for a local IRB, the benefits to that board is that they really have that relationship with their investigators. 9 times out of 10, they're very familiar with the investigators because most of the investigators, are pushing protocols through. And so they've developed this relationship. As far as the central IRB, they are obviously removed from the site or the institutional. I would say their requirements may be a little less stringent than the institutional sometimes, depending on the study. I've
I
seen
agree.
things come through and you're just like, really? But okay. But the turnaround time, I would say what makes some sites more attractive than others is if they are willing to utilize a central IRB, because again, the turnaround time couldn't be quicker. Financially, when it comes to the central IRB, those IRBs are getting paid by the investigator for their conduct of the review, whereas on a local level, the institution is going to receive prestige, if that protocol definitely makes a scientific difference,
Right.
for sure. So those are just some of the examples. What do I prefer? Depends on the protocol and the
Right.
investigator.
Right, right. And so I did a lot of hematology oncology trials, and at one time, I won't name the institution I worked for, they wouldn't allow us to use central IRB because they saw it as money being taken away and responsibility and oversight being taken away. And I think it took for these central IRBs to really gain traction across the country and for those trends to start changing. As for those of you out there who are interested, if you are already at an academic research center or at a research center that has an IRB, you can really start there, right? Internal promotion is always best, right? Unless you're ready to leave your job, that's something else too. But also, I know probably a lot of you hear a lot about Advara. If you come to our Wind Down Wednesdays, I know we talk about Advara a lot with IRB. There's also WERB, Western Institutional IRB, just places you can look. And if you're looking for a job, honestly, like Michelle said, Indeed, all you have to do is really put in IRB or Institutional Review Board, and you will get something that comes up, right? So Michelle, now it's to you because I have a question for you. Let's talk about communication. So as a community board member, you are in these meetings where you're discussing the protocol. Again, some things you might not understand, but you're able to ask the questions. Tell me how you're able to have this streamlined communication between your members, the board, maybe the investigators. Has there ever been an instance where there was a question that needed to go directly to the investigator to get feedback and able to answer a question for you? If you have an example, or just in general, how do you keep that effective communication and transparency?
Well, during the meetings, the first thing they say is that all community members need to ask questions. They tell us, ask questions. They want you to ask questions, because they do know that some of this stuff we really just don't understand, or we need a better understanding of it. So for me, oncology trials are a little bit harder. So I ask questions, and they've been very positive. Like, okay, that's a good question. And they're so passionate about what they do that they're just ready to answer the questions anyway. They welcome the questions. But first off, when the meeting starts, they do tell you, please ask questions. Don't be afraid. There's no dumb questions.
Right.
Everybody says that, but they welcome the questions. For me, I don't feel like I have a hard time communicating. If I ask something, I just ask the question.
Right.
I just ask, because you won't know unless you ask. So
Absolutely.
I feel like for any place that you're at, you need to ask questions. So
yeah, and that's true. And I do this when I teach too, and just say there's no such thing as a dumb question. There really isn't. And if you're thinking it, someone else is too, right? And so I know I had one instance before, just myself, where the IRB came back and one of their questions was, why do these patients have to get so many MRIs over the standard for their treatment? And even though the FDA had already approved the IND for us to submit this, there were other sites who already had IRB approval. Our specific IRB, there was a member who didn't understand why. And I think that's a valid question. You don't have to know why. You don't have to know Medicare rates or Medicare codes or any of those things. And so when you ask the question, maybe you'll learn something that will say, oh, well, the standard is every 6 to 8 weeks, but because it is, whatever, this drug, we need to look at it more often, right? And justify why that risk is worth the benefit that may occur. So thank you so much for doing that. And so there's so much interest. I don't know if you all are in the chat, but there's a lot of interest about being on IRBs. I don't know what y'all are saying, but y'all are saying something great, okay? So let's keep this conversation going. So Sequoia, I have a question for you too, Michelle, because the career path. Oh no, before I even get there, I want to talk about the most rewarding aspect. This is for both of you. What is the most rewarding aspect of working with IRBs, and what is your most challenging? And so I'm going to start with you, Sequoia.
My reward, well, let me start with the most challenging.
Okay, that's fine.
It's always
That's
a
fair.
challenge.
That's fair.
No, you know what I've learned though, just again, in my experience, that every IRB is different. And so with that, I think you just have to understand that the foundation of what the IRB does stems from the regulations, right? And so people have their opinions about how things should be done. And as Michelle and Tiffany, as you mentioned, yes, you should have an opportunity to ask questions or just have in that engagement and conversation and discussion. But there can be a lot of back and forth, right? Whether it's with the IRB committee or even with your investigator who just doesn't understand. And so I would say that could be a challenging aspect of it, just always kind of being in the middle of the issues and just trying to manage the problems. But ultimately, the reward is getting the study approved, right? And I think that's what the bottom line is just being part of the background of, the conception of a protocol, especially if you're working with an investigator who is thriving on investigator-initiated research as an example. So to be part of that, to see, that study get approved, and, I think that's the most rewarding, and the impact that you'll know that study will have on the advancement of clinical research and medicine in general.
Yes, I can speak to the back and forth, and I think a lot of investigators don't understand the process. Right? It's a regulatory process. They call it red tape. Hey, call it what you want. But and I also dealt with a lot of investigator-initiated studies. And for those of you not familiar, that is when a researcher actually writes their own research study, right? And they can be using investigational drugs and getting support from a manufacturer and things like that. But as Sequoia said, it is rewarding to see these type of trials get approved, patients go on it, and to see, maybe sometimes indications have changed because of what
Right.
researchers have done. So I totally understand that. And again, they're always like, my patient's waiting, which we understand, but you're not going to
Yeah.
be able to use the data if it's not approved, right? So like you gotta wait. So I totally understand that.
Right.
So, right, you know how it goes, right?
No, I was just going to say they used to call us the IRB police at one point because, we were just
I mean,
always
I may have said
causing
that once or
problems.
twice, Sequoia. Don't judge me. I told you I have a respect for you all. Okay, I do, I do. So Michelle, the same thing for you. Being a community member, what is your most rewarding? And I'm pretty sure, even though this is volunteering your time, there are some challenges. So tell me what those are too.
Well, I mean, I want to echo what Sequoia said. I mean, see these protocols go and they are approved. I mean, that's the main goal. So that's exciting because like you had a little help in making that happen. As challenges, I think sometimes the challenge is just maybe trying to fit stuff into your schedule.
Mhm.
The meetings, they can come. It doesn't matter what your schedule is, but I think challenges for me is sometimes with my workload, I'm busy. So that's one challenge for me.
Okay, so that's the thing, right? And so for those of you, again, so Sequoia's role was, this was her full-time job, right? And so for Michelle, this was something that she did in addition to her work, which leads me to career paths, right? So we're going to talk about that. So let's talk about describing the potential career trajectory. Sequoia, this is for you, and obviously you've actually done that. And so, what advice would you give someone who one is interested in getting into this role, but also what that career looks like maybe 5 years from now or 8 years from now? So maybe take us on your journey and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Tiffany, I didn't even think about the opportunities that I would be afforded just being in clinical research. And again, not really, I didn't even know, like I said, what an IRB was. I kind of just was looking for a job in healthcare and because I wanted security. Um, and I came across something in research at our local academic medical center. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I applied, again, not having any background. And the interview went very well. And I will say that I was pretty empowered because I was interviewed by um, the director, the vice president of research, as well as the assistant director, and they were all women. So I was pretty empowered to see that. I was like, okay, now this is something. Um, but through the course of my career, again, not really understanding the full potential of where I could be headed, that really didn't come until years later when I saw opportunities to work in regulatory after starting in the IRB, working specifically for our investigators, again, and having that advantage of knowing the IRB lingo and the knowledge and, how to get things through. Ultimately, that transitioned into a position in human subjects protection here at Valley about almost 6 years ago. Again, just having that background in regulatory research compliance, regulations, a little bit of everything. Um, and then I decided to advance my education. In the last couple of years, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there has been an increase in clinical research management as a pathway just to grow in the industry. So I took advantage of that and earned my master's in clinical research management recently.
Did you
And
get it from Rutgers?
no, I didn't do
Oh,
it through
okay.
Rutgers.
Okay.
No, no, they were
I heard
too.
Jersey, so I was like, okay, Rutgers.
Yeah, yeah, no, not through them. But yeah, I did look into that, but they do definitely offer a course in that as well. And then things kind of just aligned for me, to be quite honest. after I completed my master's, the position for the manager here at my site became available because the person had retired. So, here I am, and through the course of that journey, I did again become a certified IRB professional through Primer, the organization, which is the Public Responsibility in Medicine Research Organization. They have a certification for IRB professionals, which, just certifies that you're well versed in the regulations and IRB and everything else, clinical research. And so that's how and where I am today, and just very fortunate. But I would not be here without the mentorship, again, that I've had throughout the course of my journey.
Okay, and I want to just ask this question. Michelle, I'm going to ask you too, so hold on, girl, because I'm coming to you. Don't you worry. Sequoia, my question for you, and again, without getting into details, because I do believe that when we talk salary ranges and things like that, it really does depend on where you're located. And I can just say in the Northeast, salaries are more. They just are because cost of living, right?
Yes.
But in general, you don't have, if you know a range, that's fine. If you don't, it's cool too, with entry level IRB professionals. But also, how do you see that trajectory looking as well in terms of pay and pay increase over time?
It's certain for me, transitioning just from an IRB, I'm just trying to get the exact title, IRB, program assistant into becoming a supervisor. It was probably at least a $20,000 increase. Yeah. So, I mean, it was significant for me at the time, for sure. But when it's entry level, this was early 2000s. I don't even know
Right.
compared
No,
to
that's
now.
what I'm
It
saying.
would
I
be
get you.
pennies. Yeah.
So I want to ask you, Michelle, a couple of questions. And again, if you forget, because I get long-winded myself. The first question is, are you compensated as a community member? And my next question with you is, because I know this isn't your full-time work, how does that work for you in being able to do your full-time job, be on the board, and how is being on the board beneficial to you being more productive and knowledgeable in your role that you do full time? And how does your role full time, is that beneficial to your role as a community member? Kind of talk about that.
Well, first and foremost, I am compensated. To be on a community member, you can get. So let me just explain. So the meetings are usually 2 hours long, and like I said, they do it by region. So it might be all of Texas, but like I'm in San Antonio, so I just do the San Antonio ones, and then there might be Abilene or Corpus or Houston, anything like that. So I'm the first site that goes up, and it takes them maybe 15 minutes to go through explaining what they did for this site. After that site is done, they dismiss us. So 15 minutes of my time is worth $200. So it's beneficial to take
Y'all
the
heard that,
meeting.
I hope.
So that's why I said whenever they send the invite, I choose every single time because I will be available for 15 minutes to make that type of money. And then second, for my job where I'm currently working on studies, they do ask you, do you have any conflicts? So if you're working on that particular study, you shouldn't vote on it at all. And they'll ask you, do you have any conflicts? And if you do, they dismiss you. I haven't had any conflicts since I started. I started back in 2020. I haven't had any conflicts. And I think it's just because where you're working as a CRA, it's not always localized to where you're at. And then for my job personally, fitting it in, that's the juggle. I do have to fit it in because, I'm on site or I'm, having a meeting or whatever. Sometimes I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to schedule and I just put on my calendar, like this is a meeting that I need to attend for personal time. So.
Right. So I hope you all heard that. That's great. Now I know at the centers I was working at, it was a volunteer. situation because I was working at that institution, and if I chose to be a member, it was just my part of being part of the institutional community. And some of my investigators, they were doing that as part of their continuing medical education credits, right? So, but they didn't get paid either. But in this, and so always check, right? Some, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for extra cash, absolutely. Of course, we all love people. We want to do that. But if you are looking to make some extra income and you're interested in this work, that is a way to do that. If you are looking to gain more experience, because maybe your job is a data manager and all you do is enter data all day, being on a board can help you gain experience where you get to read more protocols, you get to read consent forms, you get to understand the ins and outs of what approvals look like in the clinical trial process. And so that can just help you in your own professional development as the clinical research professional as well. So I want to thank you, ladies, for that. I have one more discussion I want to talk about, and then I'm going to open the floor for any other questions because I'm pretty sure some people have some. So I want to talk about diversity on IRB boards. So I actually, in preparing for this event, found a paper that was published in 2022 by the American Journal of Bioethics, surveying 388 IRB chairpersons. And the results of that survey were only about half reported that their boards had at least one member who was a person of color. 51% were Black or African American, 56% Asian, 48% Hispanic. 85% of university and academic medical center boards are mostly white members. And so this is just not even a discussion about your board. If you want to share, if you know those stats, that's fine. But if not, that's okay. In general, how do you think diversity on boards is a reflection of how we're going to approach clinical research in the future? I will start with Michelle. What do you think about that, Michelle?
Well, diversity is very important. And I mean, I'm going to side note here, just going to like get my hair done and stuff like that. When I tell people what I do, they're just like, oh, Tuskegee, Tuskegee. And I'm like, but you don't understand. Like, we need our people to come and do clinical research so the drugs are tailored to us. Some of these adverse events that are happening, we may not happen to us, or they might find something different. I don't know. But people don't have the trust. So working even as a CRA, I see people that look like me come in and they're just kind of shocked, like, this must be okay then because I saw somebody that looked like me. So I think more of us that come up in clinical research, the more of us that know what's going on, and we can sit on these boards because the community members that I'm around, they do not look like me. They don't sound like me. They're just, there's none of us there. So I hope in the future that more of us step up to take these positions. They're hard. You don't want to be the only person asking questions, but we need to be the advocates for our community. So that's my little 2 cents.
I'm so glad you said that. And so I would encourage everyone in the room, whether you're in clinical research right now or you're interested in it, part of our role in this position that we're in this great STEM field that we're in, is to share what we know with our community, right? Not everybody wants to read a protocol. Not everybody wants to do clinical research, and that's totally fine. But we have to be the champions for change, right? When it comes to, because they will continue to bring up Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks until the end of time. And while they are important, there are other things that have been beneficial that have been done at the hands of African Americans and people of color in clinical research. And we need to acknowledge that as well, so it's not always overshadowed. And even Tuskegee and Henrietta Lacks, we have a lot that we can thank them for, right? Even though we know what the outcome of those things were. And so Sequoia, the same thing for you, not even on the board, but even in terms of people who are working in IRB roles, like IRB analysts or IRB managers. How do you see that landscape of diversity, and how can that benefit clinical research moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I can share that in my experience when it came to the IRB position, the administrators definitely diverse. But in my experience working with the boards, there was certainly a lack of diversity. I think it's also important to stress that the different roles, well, the makeup of an IRB, right? So the IRB, you have to have at least 5 members, one scientific, one non-scientific, and then community representation. we shouldn't be limited. And, when it comes to just community roles, we have to expand, our positions. And that really falls on the institution, whether it's a local IRB. What are they doing to recruit representation for the makeup of their board? So I think that's very important. In light of your question, Tiffany, I did reach out to our IRB of record. As I mentioned before, it's a commercial IRB. So I'm waiting for them to tell me, what does the demographics look like? What
Oh,
does
you
the
asked
make?
them?
I did. I sure
Okay.
did. And I think this is timely too, because there's a lot of discussion about the FDA and the guidance that they've issued about the need for diversity, right?
Yep.
But that also has to come from the IRB level too. So, these are the types of questions that we have to start asking. It has to be well-rounded. It can't just be put on the sites or the sponsors. We have to ensure that the representation certainly starts on the review level. Yeah, so I would say, it's great that they identified that there is a lack of diversity, right? So what are we going to do to ensure that we are fully representing the communities that we serve, especially when there's a need to diverse clinical trials, the participants for that matter?
I can't stress enough how what both of you said is so important, and that I'm glad you. Please let us know. Please follow up with me and let me know what your IRB says. And honestly, you can ask any of your IRBs, all of you. If you have an IRB, you can ask them. They have to tell you that, right? I also dropped your LinkedIn for everyone who's listening and watching. I dropped in Sequoia's and Michelle's LinkedIn, so you girls don't have to worry about that. And that it's just really important that we diversify again boards. It's not just participation, right? We need to see people in these roles, just like we need to see more people of color who are doctors, right? Who look like us and make us want to go to the doctor and want to get treated and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpin you ladies, and I'm going to open the floor for a discussion. If anyone has a question that I didn't answer, please let me know. I have to go through, there's a lot of you in here. I'm trying to find you all in here to see how I can, let me just search, because I'm like, wait a minute, it's a lot. Okay, so let me unpin Sequoia. And then I'm going to unpin my girl, Michelle. I'm going to unpin myself because I don't want to look at myself. Okay, I'm going to do this for Tiffany. All right.
I do have a question for Sequoia.
Sure.
Okay, Sequoia, I tried to send you this message because I couldn't remember. Did Quincy Birdsong say, what did he say about the person who developed the certification for the IRB? Am I remembering correctly that what was the history with that?
So he was referring to the CIM certification, the Certified IRB Manager. And I think Quincy shared with us, and this was a couple years ago, so forgive my memory. I think he worked under that person who was a Black man, I believe.
Yes, I remember. Okay, so my memory. Okay, because I was like, I remember Quincy said something. I'm like, let me ask Sequoia, because I feel like he either said it with me and you. I don't know. I can't remember exactly where it happened, but okay.
Yeah. Yep. He created the exam. Yeah.
And what is that exam called? I'm gonna put it in the
That
chat.
is a Certified IRB Manager. If you Google it, it should come up. So that test you can take at any given time, and it's open book. I think they give you at least a week to answer. I think it's at least 100 questions, but it stemmed from the regulation. So I would say the FDA regulations, obviously HHS, as well as HIPAA, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Michelle. I mean, not Michelle, Danielle. Mitchell. I was thinking Michelle. I'm looking at Michelle saying Danielle. Does anybody else have a question that you want to ask while they're here? Because don't get off of this Zoom and say, dang, I should have asked that question, right? Because again, if you don't really know about the IRB, people don't understand how they got into that role. But Sequoia is a success poster child about how you can literally fall into this role. I can say for myself, in regulatory, I won't say how long ago, a long time ago, I was doing banking, right? I was doing banking regulations. And in my naive mind, which actually worked to my benefit, I said to myself, how difficult can it be if I'm already reading regulations? Banking can't be that much different from research if you have to abide by the rules, right? And so that is how I got my interview. That's why cover letters are so important, because I remember writing a cover letter explaining how I had those transferable skills that would be beneficial in this kind of role, right? And then I grew to love and have an appreciation for science, right, that I never thought I would have. And especially being on an IRB board or working with the IRB, you get to see so much without having to do all of those things that the scientists are doing and the biostatisticians are doing. We get to see it all, which is actual advantage point that I love to see. Before we go, we have 4 minutes, but before we do that, if we get any more questions, I just want to thank you both again for taking the time. I want to thank Danielle and Black Women in Clinical Research for hosting these events and all the events that you do. She's not asking me to say this, but I'm going to drop it anyway. The BWICR second annual national conference is happening, okay? And it is happening November 8th through the 11th in ATL. And you all need to get those tickets, okay? Because it's going to be hot, hot, hot. And I see that we do have a question. So Amelia, you can come off mute, my dear, and ask whatever question or comment that you have.
Yes, I have a question for Michelle. She's the one that's got like the IRB job in addition to her day job, correct?
Correct.
So, my question is, because I did interview for a position once with the IRB, and I did disclose that I did disclose that I did work in research, and I would love part-time opportunities as well as full-time opportunities at that time. But I think that might have been a deal breaker. So my question is, how did you approach, when you interviewed for that job, how did you approach the fact that you had another job, basically?
Well, they asked me if I did have another position. And at the time I was a research assistant. So I was transparent and honest. I don't know how to interview. Like some people like can say things off the top of their heads. And I was just very honest about what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So
all right.
I don't know if that helps you, but
yeah. So you just told them that I want to be involved in the IRB, even though I'm a research assistant.
And when I was a research assistant, I worked on site. So to take those meetings, I had to take a lunch to take my meetings.
Okay.
So I would just schedule them, or I would pick the times that I knew I could take a lunch. So
okay.
Yeah.
And with the IRB positions, because I literally did like a quick search on LinkedIn and on Indeed. I seen a lot that says on site, are there remote opportunities?
Well, mine was, it said video conferencing. So it was, I knew that was a remote position.
Oh, I see. Okay. I was just, those were my questions basically, because I've been interested in, I did interview with Advara, but, I don't know. When I interviewed, it seemed like it was a good opportunity. It seemed like it was going somewhere, but then I never really heard back from the hiring manager. And I know one of our members works for Advara, and she kind of, recommended me for the role. And, she even said, oh, my manager liked you and everything. And he'll probably follow up with you, but I never really got that response. So that's why I was just asking.
Did you follow up with them?
I did.
Okay.
I did follow up. I sent emails and stuff, but I wasn't sure what went on. Granted, this was, I think, just before the pandemic came down, or probably around the pandemic.
Try again.
Yeah.
Always try, right? I mean, it's all about networking, right? And once you keep talking, they'll know your name, like, oh, it's Amelia again. She's asking if there are any openings again for the board. Don't give up on that. And also, like Michelle said, maybe you can look outside of where you are for remote board membership, right? Where you can do it. Maybe you can be in a whole nother state, but they don't really need someone to be there physically. And since the pandemic, even when people were starting to come back into the office, some people kept those type of meetings permanently remote just because it was more feasible to do so. So that's a very good question, and thank you for asking that. We're actually at 8 o'clock, so I do want to say, for those of you who need to leave,
thank you.
We're wrapping this up. No, thank you, Amelia. Thank you so much. Again, Sequoia and Michelle and Danielle, thank you again so much. We will be hosting another event next month. And if you haven't been to our Wind Down Wednesday, which is every Wednesday, and guess who's your host? Me. So you already know it's going to be fun. So please come to that as well. So again, I know you ladies have your thing to do, so please leave if you must. Everybody else has been great talking to you. I'm going to stay on for a couple of minutes just so you can get those LinkedIns that we got, because Sequoia and Michelle's and a lot of you are dropping your own LinkedIn. So I'm going to leave it up for another couple of minutes. And thank you all, and have a great night. Okay. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much again, ladies.
Thank you.